So I've been meaning to try to get to this topic for a while. I actually have a couple of topics in queue that my staff has assigned to me that I just haven't gotten to. My father passed away last month, and then I got a puppy, which she's trolling somewhere along in the car anyways. But I got an hour because my daughter is getting fitted for contacts. But overall, the most common question I get from friends and family where they expect kind of like, oh, here's a really quick response, give me answer is, how much should I pay for this self-storage facility? And if it was that simple, then I probably wouldn't be in self-storage business altogether, because anything that simple, I would caution, it's that simple for everyone, and that's not an industry that you want to be in. But I'm going to give you an idea of how I formulate a quick measure for that. And that measure is a multiple of your blended price per square foot. So what that means is that depending on what market in, I can pay anywhere from a multiple of 60x to 120x the blended price per square foot of facility. So people talk about, well, how much you pay per unit. I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense because I have 10 by 20s. That's naturally going to be more expensive than a 5 by 10. And if I'm buying a 5 by 10 in San Francisco, California versus a 10 by 20 in, the middle of Wyoming where there's only 500 people that live around there, obviously those are two different things. And so if you take the average price of the per square foot, so let's say that a facility has 10,000 square feet, the rent roll is $10,000, then that's $1 per square foot blended for the whole facility. And from that, then I can formulate what I could pay as a multiple of that. So in general, Class A facilities that you can get very strong financing in Class A areas, like if I'm in downtown San Francisco, I'm probably going to be a much higher multiple because I can get one, much better financing so I can produce more cash flow. And two, it's getting a much higher price per square foot in relationship to the expense ratio. So what that means is that if I buy a Class A building that was built yesterday, or if I buy a 50-year-old building that was built in the middle of nowhere in really rural area, chances are I'm going to have less CapEx or maintenance on the newer facility. And so if I have a brand new facility that is top of the market rent, that's also going to get the best financing, I'm going to be at a much higher multiple. If I'm in an area that's very rural, there's cheap land all around it, I got to factor in overbuilding a number of things, then I'm going to be at a much lower multiple. So typically what I do is the very first facility that you buy in a market, you have to underwrite it underway through. You can use anywhere from a 30 to 40% expense ratio. Get that from the self-storage almanac or a number of other sources, what the average expense ratio is in that market. So if you're at a rent roll of $10,000 and the average expense ratio for your region is 35%, then use that. Now, that may not be how you operate it, but what the nice thing about it is if you assume based on regional averages, later on when the bank sees when you're underwriting it, they're like, okay, well, this is in line with what we see from reputable sources. It's also what your appraisers were going to use. And then you work backwards from that. So then once you get that final price you can pay, let's say that you realize, hey, I can pay $2 million for this facility that is 10,000 square feet. That's a $200 a square foot, so I'm at a multiple at 200. That's really not going to happen, but that's just a crude breakdown of how you're going to get those numbers down. So you kind of summarize, figure out your regional expense ratio, which normally when you use these metrics, if you're using it on a Class A facility, which is most of this data comes from, it's going to be slightly conservative. The more you are willing to self-manage, to mow lawns or whatever you're going to might potentially do, that will also bring your expense ratio down. But the bank's not going to want to see that, because if it goes back to the bank, they're going to want to see what kind of expense ratio can they run it at if it goes back to them. And then secondly, work backwards from that to find a blended price per square foot for the whole facility and the multiple you're willing to pay. And that should apply for similar facilities in a similar market. Obviously, you got to factor in those other things like we talked about: condition, how rural it is, what type of financing you can get. So hopefully this helps you formulate something that you can find a quick valuation on a self-storage facility roughly within a few seconds.